Do you want to improve your listening and speaking skills in English? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you understood everything around you, but still struggled to speak fluently? This episode is for you. Today, we're diving into real-life stories, personal experiences, and examples that will help improve your listening and speaking abilities. By the end of this episode, you'll not only be able to understand more complex English conversations, but you'll also be able to express your thoughts with more confidence. Let's get started with a question. Have you ever been in a foreign country, struggling to communicate, but slowly realizing that you're picking up more and more of the language? I remember the first time I traveled to Italy. I was eager to speak Italian, but my skills were limited to just basic phrases. One day, I found myself at a cafe trying to order a simple coffee. The barista spoke so fast that I felt like I was lost in translation. But then, something clicked. The more I listened, the more I understood. It wasn't just about the words. They were a combination of sounds, context, and gestures. Slowly, I began to form my responses. And by the end of that week, I was speaking with confidence. This experience taught me that listening is a crucial part of speaking. The more you listen to real-life conversations, the easier it becomes to understand the flow of language and the expressions that native speakers use. If you want to speak like a native, you have to listen like one too. And that's what we're focusing on today, how to improve your listening skills through real-life stories and examples that mirror C1 and C2 level English. Now, let me tell you about my friend Sarah. Sarah grew up in the United States, but after college, she moved to Spain for a job. At first, she could barely understand the Spanish spoken around her. But Sarah didn't give up. She started watching local TV shows and listening to podcasts in Spanish. It was tough at first. Some words were hard to catch, and the speed of the conversations was overwhelming. But over time, she began to recognize common phrases, idioms, and slang. One day, while attending a work meeting, Sarah realized she understood everything everyone was saying. She didn't just understand the words. She understood the context, the humor, and the subtle cues in the conversation. This process didn't happen overnight. But through consistent listening and practice, she was able to improve her listening skills and eventually become fluent in speaking. Just like Sarah, you too can improve your English by listening to real-life situations, from casual chats to professional conversations. This is exactly what we're going to practice in this episode. Let's talk about another example. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who used a lot of idiomatic expressions? At first, these phrases might confuse you. I had this experience when I first moved to London. My friend Alex, who was British, said something like, "I'm feeling under the weather today." I thought it was strange because I couldn't see any weather, and I wasn't sure what he meant. But over time, I started to recognize common idioms like under the weather, meaning feeling sick, and break the ice, meaning to make someone feel comfortable. Understanding idioms and phrases like these is part of mastering advanced English. It's not just about knowing the vocabulary. It's about understanding the culture behind the language. And that's where real-life exposure comes in. By listening to conversations, whether it's a podcast, a movie, or a news report, you'll start picking up these phrases, and soon you'll be using them in your own speech. Let's dive into another personal story. Last year, I visited a conference in New York City. The speakers were all experts in their fields, and I was amazed at how fluent and articulate they were. But what stood out to me was how they used pauses in their speech. Instead of filling the silence with or like, they took a brief pause to gather their thoughts. This gave me a new perspective on speaking. It's not about rushing your words. It's about delivering them clearly and confidently. Listening to these professionals helped me realize that silence can be a powerful tool in communication, and that's something you can apply to your own speaking practice. Listen to podcasts or interviews with professionals in fields you're interested in. Notice how they speak, how they structure their sentences, and how they use pauses to emphasize their points. By practicing this in your own speech, you'll sound more natural and confident when speaking English. Now, I'd like you to think about your own experiences. Have you ever been in a situation where you struggled to speak, but listening helped? You understand the conversation better? Maybe you were at a business meeting, a family gathering, or even just chatting with friends. Think about how you can use listening to improve your speaking skills. Just like my experiences in Italy, Spain, and New York, real-life examples are key to understanding and mastering advanced English. So, as we move through this episode, I'll share more tips and personal stories that will guide you through improving both your listening and speaking skills. Keep listening, pay attention to the details, and soon enough, you'll find yourself speaking more confidently and understanding English at a much higher level. Now, let's look at another story that might sound familiar to you. Have you ever been in a situation where you understand most of what someone is saying, but you still feel nervous about speaking up? That's a feeling I know well. When I first started working in an English-speaking environment, I often found myself in meetings where I understood everything being said, but I was hesitant to contribute. I kept thinking, what if I say something wrong? But over time, I realized that the key to improving my speaking skills was simply starting to talk. At first, I made small mistakes, but I learned from them, and soon, I became more comfortable sharing my ideas. The same thing can happen to you. When you listen to others, you can learn how they structure their sentences and how they express their thoughts. This gives you the confidence to try it yourself. Listening to real conversations helps you pick up not only words, but also the rhythm and flow of the language. One of the best ways to improve your listening skills is by listening to a variety of people. Have you ever noticed how people speak differently depending on where they come from? For example, in the United States, you'll hear different accents depending on whether you're in New York or Texas, and in the UK, people in London sound different from people in Manchester. Understanding these differences will help you listen better. The more diverse the sources you listen to, the more you will understand the language in real-life situations. Let's talk about a personal experience I had when I moved to a new city. I was attending a social event where everyone was speaking English, but they were using phrases I had never heard before. It was a bit overwhelming at first, but I decided to pay attention to how they spoke to each other. For example, one person said, "That sounds brilliant," and I had no idea what brilliant meant in this context, but as I listened more, I realized they were using it to mean great or fantastic. By listening and asking a few questions, I learned new phrases that I could start using in my own conversations. This is a big part of improving your speaking skills, getting used to new phrases and expressions that native speakers use. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. People are usually happy to help, and that's how you can build your vocabulary and become more comfortable speaking. Another helpful tip is to listen to things that interest you. For example, if you love sports, try listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos about your favorite team or sport. You'll not only learn the vocabulary related to that topic, but you'll also become more familiar with the natural pace of spoken English. The more you expose yourself to different topics, the easier it will be to understand more complex ideas and express your thoughts clearly. Speaking of which, have you ever tried to tell a story in English? It's a great way to practice your speaking skills. I remember once telling my friend about a trip I took to the beach. I was nervous because I wasn't sure I would be able to explain everything correctly. But as I started talking about the weather, the sand, and the waves, I realized I didn't need to stress about getting every word perfect. What mattered was telling the story and getting my point across. Listening to others tell their stories and then practicing telling your own can really help you become a better speaker. Finally, one of the best ways to practice both listening and speaking is by having regular conversations with someone who speaks English. It could be a friend, a colleague, or even a language exchange partner. The more you practice speaking, the easier it becomes. And don't worry if you make mistakes. Along the way, every mistake is an opportunity to learn and improve. Just keep listening, keep speaking, and most importantly, enjoy the process. Language learning is a journey, and every step counts. As you continue listening to this episode, pay attention to how I use phrases and structures that will help you improve both your listening and speaking skills. With each story, try to notice how I explain things, how I describe events, and how I express my opinions. These are all tools you can use in your own conversations. Now, let's dive into another story that helped me improve my listening and speaking skills. A few years ago, I had the chance to work in a team with people from different countries. Some of them spoke English very fluently, while others were still learning. It was interesting to see how we all communicated. At first, I felt nervous when they spoke so fast or used words I didn't know. But instead of worrying, I decided to focus on what I understood. Slowly, I picked up words I hadn't heard before, and I started to feel more comfortable joining in on conversations. One thing I learned from this experience is that listening isn't just about understanding every single word. It's about understanding the main idea and the emotions behind what someone is saying. For example, even if you don't know all the words, you can often understand if someone is happy, excited, or frustrated just by their tone of voice or body language. This made me realize that listening carefully can help you not only with understanding language, but also with understanding how people are feeling. The same thing happens when you listen to real-life stories or podcasts in English. It's not always about catching every word. Sometimes, it's more about catching the main message. The more you listen, the better you'll get at understanding the bigger picture and the details that matter. Let me share another example of how listening can improve your speaking. A few months ago, I attended a professional workshop where everyone was speaking English. There were so many new words and terms I hadn't heard before, but I decided to focus on the overall message instead of stressing over the individual words. Later, I practiced explaining the key points to my friend in simple English. I didn't worry too much about using complex phrases. I just focused on sharing the main ideas in my own words. This helped me improve my speaking skills and build confidence in using new vocabulary. In everyday situations, the key is to listen actively. For example, when you're watching a movie or listening to a podcast, try to pay attention to how the speakers say things, not just what they say. Notice how they use different tones, pauses, or emphasis. These small details can make a huge difference in how you speak and understand English. You can even try repeating some of the phrases you hear using the same tone and style. This kind of practice will help you sound more natural when speaking. Think about a time when you tried to explain something in English, and maybe you didn't find the right words right away. It's totally normal. The important thing is to keep trying. When you listen to how native speakers express themselves, you'll learn how to put your thoughts together more clearly. Over time, you'll find it easier to form sentences, even when you don't know every word you want to say. One thing that really helped me improve my speaking was watching TED Talks. These talks are not only informative, but they also show how to express ideas clearly and confidently in English. I would listen to a TED Talk, and then I'd try to explain what I learned to someone else in my own words. This gave me practice with both listening and speaking, and I also picked up useful phrases that I could use in my own conversations. Have you ever thought about how listening to different types of content can help you improve both your listening and speaking skills? You don't have to just stick to podcasts or news reports. Try listening to interviews, stories, or even interviews with people you admire. You'll start to recognize different speech patterns, ways to introduce topics, and how to express emotions through language. By doing this, you'll get better at understanding different accents, speeds, and speaking styles. It's like training your ear to recognize the variety of ways English can be spoken. Let me tell you about another way to improve your speaking through listening. Last year, I joined a book club where we discussed a new book every month. At first, I wasn't sure I would be able to speak fluently about the book. But listening to how others express their thoughts helped me a lot. They used some advanced vocabulary, and I learned new ways to express my opinions. Each time I participated, I felt more confident. I even began using new vocabulary from the book in my conversations with friends. This is a great example of how listening and speaking can go hand in hand. The more you listen to how people talk about a topic, the more you'll feel prepared to speak about it yourself. Whether you're talking about a book, a movie, or even something in your daily life, listening to others gives you the tools you need to express your ideas more clearly. Have you noticed how sometimes when you're listening to a conversation, you begin to form your response in your mind before the other person finishes speaking? This is a great sign. It means you're becoming more fluent in the language. The more you listen to English, the more you'll start to think in English. This process will help you speak faster and more naturally as your brain gets used to processing the language. So, the more you expose yourself to English conversations, the easier it becomes to understand and respond. Next time you're listening to a podcast or watching a video in English, try to repeat some of the key phrases or sentences. It might feel a little awkward at first, but with practice, you'll sound more confident and fluent. The more you practice, the better your speaking will become. In this episode, we've talked about a lot of ways to improve your listening and speaking skills. From real-life stories to practical tips, the main point is to keep practicing and never give up. Even when you make mistakes, keep listening and keep speaking. It's all part of the learning process. The more you expose yourself to English, the more natural it will feel, and soon you'll be speaking with confidence in any situation. Here's another story that might sound familiar to you. When I was in college, I remember how nervous I felt during my first group presentation in English. My team was tasked with presenting a project to our classmates and I was terrified. Even though I had prepared and knew the material, speaking in front of so many people in English was intimidating. I worried that I might forget my words or pronounce something incorrectly, but then I remembered the advice my professor gave us. Just focus on communicating the idea, not on being perfect. I took a deep breath and started to speak. The more I talked, the more confident I felt. I noticed that the audience wasn't focused on my mistakes. They were focused on the content of my presentation. After the presentation, my teammates and I received great feedback, and I realized that listening to how others spoke in class had actually helped me feel more comfortable. That experience taught me an important lesson. It's okay to make mistakes, especially when you're practicing. What matters is how you communicate your ideas and how willing you are to keep trying. The more you practice speaking, whether it's for a presentation or just a simple conversation, the better you'll become at expressing yourself clearly. Let's talk about something that can also help boost your speaking skills. Storytelling. Have you ever told a story in English to a friend or classmate? Storytelling can be a powerful way to practice speaking because it allows you to focus on describing events in detail. It's a bit like giving a mini presentation about your life. For example, last week I shared a funny story with my friends about a trip I took to the mountains. I had to explain how I got lost during a hike, how I met some friendly locals, and how I eventually found my way back. I noticed that as I told the story, I used different phrases and vocabulary that I had picked up from listening to others. My friends were engaged and I felt confident because I was talking about something that happened to me. Something real. Storytelling is a great way to practice both listening and speaking. By listening to others tell their stories, you can pick up new phrases and ways to explain things. And when you share your own stories, you get to practice using those phrases in context. It's a cycle of learning that helps improve both your speaking and listening skills. Another important part of listening and speaking is understanding how to adapt your language depending on who you're talking to. For example, when you're speaking to your friends, you might use informal language and casual expressions. But when you're talking to a professor, a boss, or someone you don't know well, you need to use more formal language. This is something I learned when I started doing group work in college. In one of my classes, we had to discuss a complex topic in a group. At first, I was using very casual language, which was fine with my friends. But when I spoke to the professor, I realized that my informal language wasn't appropriate. I quickly adapted and started using more formal expressions to explain my ideas. I also noticed that by listening to how my classmates spoke during the discussion, I learned the right balance between being professional and still sounding natural. This experience taught me that language isn't just about knowing words. It's about knowing when to use them. This is a key part of both listening and speaking. When you listen to how people speak in different situations, you begin to understand what's expected and how to adjust your language accordingly. Let me tell you a short story from my college life. One semester, I was involved in a language exchange program where I was paired with a student from another country who wanted to practice English. We would meet once a week, and our goal was to improve both our listening and speaking skills. At first, I felt a bit uncomfortable because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to help her. But as we spoke more, I realized that we both learned from each other. She taught me new words in her language, and I helped her with English pronunciation and grammar. Over time, I became more confident in my ability to listen and respond in English. This experience also reminded me that the more you expose yourself to real-life conversations, the better you get at understanding the language. Language exchange programs or even casual conversations with friends can be a great way to practice and improve your skills. Now, think about a time when you were able to understand a conversation in English, but you didn't feel confident enough to join in. Maybe it was a conversation in a cafe, at school, or even during a meeting at work. I've been there too, and it's completely normal. But over time, as you listen more and practice speaking, you'll start to feel more comfortable. The key is to keep pushing yourself, even when it feels a little uncomfortable. And here's something that helped me. When I didn't feel confident speaking, I would start by listening to short conversations in English and trying to repeat what I heard. I would pay attention to how people said things, their tone of voice, and how they used expressions in different situations. This helped me understand how to use the right words in the right context. It was like learning to ride a bike. You don't get it right away, but the more you practice, the easier it becomes. This method not only improved my listening skills, but also gave me the courage to start speaking more. You can do the same by listening to conversations on YouTube, podcasts, or even TV shows in English. Pick topics you enjoy and focus on the way the speakers express themselves. When you're ready, try to join in by repeating phrases or sentences. This will help you feel more natural when speaking in real conversations. It's important to remember that language learning is a journey, and every step you take brings you closer to your goal. Even if you make mistakes along the way, don't get discouraged. Each mistake is a lesson, and with each one, you'll get better at listening and speaking. So, keep practicing, keep listening, and keep speaking. You'll find that the more you immerse yourself in the language, the easier it will be to understand and communicate in English. And soon, you'll be able to speak with confidence no matter the situation. Let me tell you about a time in college when I really learned the value of listening. One of my classes had a group discussion on a very challenging topic, and I wasn't sure if I would be able to keep up with the conversation. At first, I felt nervous because some of my classmates were speaking in advanced English using words and phrases I hadn't heard before. But instead of worrying about what I didn't know, I decided to focus on the overall meaning of what was being said. I remember one of my classmates, Sarah, who was a fluent speaker. She explained a complex idea, and even though I didn't understand all the words, I could follow her reasoning and feel the excitement in her voice. Her enthusiasm made the topic more interesting, and I started to piece together the meaning, from the context and tone. After the discussion, I was able to join the conversation and share my thoughts on the topic, and it felt amazing to be part of it. This experience taught me a lot about the importance of context in listening. Even when you don't understand every word, you can often figure out the meaning by listening to how the speaker feels about the topic. This made me realize that listening is about more than just hearing words. It's about understanding emotions and ideas. This can also help with your speaking skills. For example, if you're having a conversation and you don't know a specific word, you can use other words to explain your idea. This is something I learned when I was practicing English with my friend, Alex. Sometimes we would both struggle with vocabulary, but we'd try to explain the meaning of the word using simpler words. Doing this helped both of us speak more clearly and confidently, even when we didn't have the perfect word. Now, let me share a funny little story. A while ago, I was listening to a podcast where the hosts were talking about their travels to different countries. One of them, Mark, shared a hilarious story about getting lost in a small village in Italy. He didn't speak Italian very well, and he had trouble understanding the directions from the locals. But instead of feeling frustrated, he decided to laugh it off and asked for help from a group of people at a cafe. To his surprise, they all spoke a little bit of English and guided him back to the right path. His story made me laugh, and it also reminded me of how important it is to stay positive, even when you don't understand everything around you. This brings us to a useful tip for improving your English. Don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something. I used to hesitate when I didn't understand a word.